Question 1. A school wants to understand students' opinions about a new lunch menu. The principal surveys students who are eating lunch in the cafeteria at noon. Question. Is this sample likely to be biased? Why or why not? Now, let's go through the explanation for question 1. The correct answer is, yes, this sample is biased. The students were selected because they were easy to reach at lunchtime. This means not all students had an equal chance of being chosen. Students who eat at a different time, bring lunch from home, or are not in the cafeteria at noon were not included. As shown in the diagram, the sample mainly comes from one specific group, rather than the entire population. Key idea. Convenience sampling often leads to bias because selection is based on ease, not equal chance. Question 2. A school wants to estimate the percentage of students who prefer online homework. The school randomly selects 200 students from a list of all enrolled students. Among the selected students, 70% say they prefer online homework. Question. Is this sample likely to be biased? Explain your reasoning. Hint. Focus on how the students were selected, not the result. Now, let's go through the explanation for question 2. The correct answer is, no, this sample is not likely to be biased. Here's why. The students were randomly selected from a list of all enrolled students. This means every student had an equal chance of being chosen. The selection was not based on convenience, location, or time, so major selection bias is unlikely. Even though the result, 70%, might seem surprising, random samples can still produce unexpected outcomes. Key idea. A random sample from the entire population is generally unbiased because the selection method supports representativeness. Question 3. A school district wants to evaluate the impact of a new online homework platform on student performance. The district analyzes data from students who voluntarily signed up for the platform during its first semester. Among these students, average test scores increased compared to the previous year. Based on this analysis, the district concludes that the new online homework platform causes higher test scores for students in the district. Question. Which of the following best explains why this conclusion may be flawed? Take a moment to think about how the students were selected, and whether the data actually supports a causal conclusion. Now, let's go through the explanation for question 3. The correct answer is B. The students were not randomly selected, so the sample may not be representative of all students in the district. In this study, students chose to sign up voluntarily for the new platform. That means the sample likely includes students who are more motivated, more engaged, or already higher performing than average. Because not every student had an equal chance to be included, the sample does not represent the full student population. The increase in test scores shows an association, but it does not prove causation. Other factors, such as motivation, prior achievement, or outside support, could explain the observed improvement. Key idea. Correlation does not imply causation, especially when the sample is self-selected and not representative. A city records daily data on ice cream sales and the number of people visiting the beach. The data show that on days when ice cream sales are high, the number of beach visitors is also high. What is the most reasonable explanation for this relationship? Now, let's go through the explanation for question 4. The correct answer is C. The key idea here is that the data show a relationship, but they do not prove a direct cause and effect connection. On warmer days, more people choose to go to the beach. At the same time, warmer weather also leads to higher ice cream sales. This third factor, such as temperature or weather, affects both variables and explains why they increase together. In other words, the data are consistent with both variables responding to the same outside influence, rather than one directly causing the other. Let's look at why the other choices are incorrect. Choice A suggests that buying ice cream causes people to go to the beach, which is unrealistic and not supported by the data. Choice B assumes a direct causal relationship in one direction. While this explanation might seem possible in real life, the data provided only show that the two variables move together. There is no evidence that changes in one variable directly cause changes in the other. This is a common SAT trap. Even if a causal explanation sounds reasonable, the question asks for the most reasonable explanation based only on the information given. Choice D is incorrect because the data clearly show that ice cream sales and beach attendance are related. SAT takeaway. When two variables increase together, always consider whether a third factor could be influencing both before concluding causation. Question 5. A city records data showing that neighborhoods with more frequent police patrols also report higher numbers of crimes. What is the most reasonable explanation for this relationship? Now, let's go through the explanation for question 5. The correct answer is B. The scatter plot shows a clear positive relationship between police patrol frequency and the number of crime reports. However, this relationship alone does not prove that police patrols cause crime. A more reasonable explanation is that neighborhoods with higher crime levels receive more frequent police patrols in response. In this situation, the direction of causation is likely reversed. In other words, crime levels influence where police patrols are assigned, rather than police patrols increasing crime. Let's look at why the other choices are incorrect. Choice A assumes that increased police patrols directly cause more crime. This explanation is not supported by the data and does not make logical sense. Choice C is incorrect because the scatterplot clearly shows that the two variables are related. Choice D introduces an explanation about reporting accuracy, but the problem provides no information about how accurately crimes are reported. SAT takeaway. When two variables are related, always consider whether causation might work in the opposite direction before drawing a conclusion. Question 6. A survey finds that people who report exercising more hours per week also report lower stress levels. What is the most reasonable conclusion that can be drawn from this information? Now, let's go through the explanation for question 6. The data show that people who report exercising more hours per week also report lower stress levels. This tells us that there is a relationship between exercise and stress. However, the survey does not establish a cause and effect relationship. Because the information is self-reported and observational, we cannot determine which variable influences the other. It may be that exercising more helps reduce stress. It is also possible that people who experience less stress are more likely to exercise more. The data do not allow us to confirm either explanation. Since the direction of influence and other controlling factors are unknown, no causal conclusion can be drawn. SAT takeaway. When data show a relationship but provide no evidence about causation, the safest and most reasonable conclusion is to avoid claiming cause and effect. Question 7. Two schools surveyed students about whether they prefer online classes or in-person classes. The results of the surveys are shown in the chart. Based on the data, what is the most reasonable conclusion? Now, let's go through the explanation for question 7. The correct answer is B. The chart shows student preferences for online and in-person classes at two different schools. At first glance, the results from School A and School B appear to follow a similar pattern. However, an important detail is the difference in sample size. School A surveyed far fewer students than School B. When a sample size is small, the results are more likely to be affected by random variation. This means that the results from School A are less reliable and should be interpreted with caution. In contrast, School B collected responses from a much larger group of students. Because larger samples tend to produce more stable and representative results, conclusions based on School B's data are more dependable. Let's consider why the other choices are incorrect. Choices that treat the two surveys as equally reliable ignore the effect of sample size. Other choices attempt to make broad claims about all students, which the data do not support. SAT takeaway. When survey results come from samples of different sizes, the results based on the larger sample are usually more trustworthy. Question 8. A website posted an online poll asking users whether they are satisfied with the website's new design. Participation in the poll was optional, and only some visitors chose to respond. Based on the information given, what is the most reasonable conclusion? Now, let's go through the explanation for question 8. The poll results show the opinions of visitors who chose to respond to an online survey about the website's new design. This tells us something about the respondents, but it does not necessarily describe all website visitors. Because participation was optional, the survey is subject to voluntary response bias. People with strong opinions, whether positive or negative, are more likely to respond than people who feel neutral. As a result, the poll may overrepresent certain viewpoints and underrepresent others. The opinions of visitors who did not respond are unknown. For this reason, the results cannot be safely generalized to all website visitors. SAT takeaway. When survey results come from voluntary responses, they often reflect the views of respondents rather than the entire population. Question 9. A researcher wants to estimate the average amount of time students at a large university spend studying each week. To collect data, the researcher surveys students who are studying in the university library on a weekday afternoon. Based on the information given, what is a limitation of this sampling method? Now, let's go through the explanation for question 9. The researcher wants to estimate how much time all students at a large university spend studying each week. However, the survey was conducted only among students who were studying in the library on a weekday afternoon. This creates a limitation because the sample was selected based on convenience rather than randomly. Students who choose to study in the library at that time may study more than students who study elsewhere, such as at home or in dorms, or at different times of day. As a result, the sample is unlikely to represent all university students accurately, and the results may overestimate the average amount of time spent studying. SAT takeaway. When data are collected from a convenient but narrow group, the results may not generalize to the entire population. Question 10. A city wants to estimate the percentage of residents who support a proposed change to public transportation. To collect data, the city conducts a survey by sending an online questionnaire to residents' email addresses. Based on the information given, what is a potential limitation of this sampling method? Now, let's go through the explanation for question 10. The city wants to measure support for a proposed change to public transportation among all residents. However, the survey is conducted only by sending an online questionnaire to email addresses. This creates a potential limitation because not all residents have email access. As a result, some individuals are excluded from the survey entirely and have no opportunity to respond. These excluded residents may have opinions about public transportation that differ from those who do have email access. Because they are not represented in the sample, the survey results may not accurately reflect the views of the entire population. SAT takeaway: when parts of a population are left out of a survey because of how the sample is collected, the data may be affected by undercoverage. Question 11. A school wants to measure students' opinions about homework. Two different surveys are conducted using different question wording. The results from the two surveys are noticeably different. Which statement best explains this difference? Now, let's go through the explanation for question 11. In this example, both surveys are given to students in the same school, but the wording of the questions is different. Survey A uses emotionally charged language, such as excessive and unnecessary stress. These words suggest a negative viewpoint and may influence students' responses to reflect that perspective. Survey B, on the other hand, asks a neutral question and allows students to share their opinions without being guided toward a particular response. Because the wording in Survey A leads respondents in a specific direction, the results may be biased. SAT takeaway: even when the sample is appropriate, biased or leading question wording can influence responses and affect the reliability of survey data. Question 12. A school wants to estimate the percentage of students who feel prepared for a final exam. The school emails a survey to all students, but only a small portion of students respond. Based on the information given, what is a potential limitation of this survey? Now, let's go through the explanation for question 12. The survey was sent to all students, but only a small portion responded. This creates a limitation because the results may not represent the entire student population. If the students who chose to respond are different from those who did not respond, the data can become biased. For example, students who feel especially prepared, or especially unprepared, may be more likely to answer the survey than students who feel neutral or are too busy to respond. Because the opinions of non-responders are unknown, the survey results may overestimate or underestimate the true percentage of students who feel prepared. SAT takeaway: when many people do not respond, the results may suffer from non-response bias and may not generalize to the full population. Question 13. A study finds that people who drink more coffee tend to report higher productivity at work. Which statement best explains why this relationship does not necessarily mean that drinking coffee causes higher productivity? Now, let's go through the explanation for question 13. The correct answer is C. The data show that coffee consumption and reported productivity increase together, but that alone does not establish a cause and effect relationship. A third variable can explain this pattern. For example, people with heavier workloads or more demanding jobs may drink more coffee and also report higher productivity. In that case, both variables increase because of job demands, not because coffee directly causes productivity. Let's briefly consider why the other choices are not the best explanation. Choice A assumes a direct causal relationship, but the study only shows an association. Choice B suggests reverse causation. While that is possible, the SAT most often prioritizes the presence of a third variable when causation is not established. Choice D does not match the positive relationship shown in the data. SAT takeaway: when two variables are related, do not assume causation. First, consider whether a third factor could be influencing both. Question 14. A researcher wants to estimate the percentage of residents in a city who support a new environmental policy. Which method would best improve the reliability of the survey results? Now, let's look at the explanation for question 14. The correct answer is B. Using a randomly selected sample of residents and asking a neutrally worded question best improves the reliability of survey results. The goal of the survey is to estimate opinions of all residents in the city. To do that, the sample needs to represent the entire population as fairly as possible. Random sampling helps reduce selection bias, and neutral wording prevents the question itself from influencing responses. Let's look at why the other choices are incorrect. Choice A relies on volunteers, which can lead to voluntary response bias. People who choose to participate may already have strong opinions. Choice C focuses on asking more questions, but it does not address how participants are selected or whether the wording is unbiased. Choice D uses convenience sampling by surveying people who are easiest to reach, which may exclude large portions of the population. SAT takeaway: reliable survey results depend not only on how many questions are asked, but on who is surveyed and how the questions are worded.